I hope everybody out there is celebrating a happy January 6th. One of my favorite secular holidays out there, second to 9/11. It seems that January 6th always have some of the craziest things happening all the time. This year, we have Justin Trudeau being expelled from as the position of prime minister and to be quickly replaced by someone else for a short while. Great, glorious. As we all know, 2020 January 6th. The mega boomers and the boomer waffen stormed the capital of the United States and tried to dethrone the deep state and the black hats and all of the corrupt people who are destroying the US. And this year, and not this year, obviously, but many years ago, we had even crazier things going on with January 6th. And that's what we're here to discuss today. We're not going to be talking about Jan 6 and the boomers. I'm not sure if that is still accepted on TOS these days, unless you have to say that, yes, it was an insurrection, and yes, that it was a bad thing. If you say it's an insurrection, it was a good thing, but I don't think they'd like that as much. But no, we're going to go through FDR's State of the Union address from 1941. And if you don't know about this historical point in US history, World War II was currently waging on, but the US had not entered the conflict. So this was at a point in time where Germany was doing very well for themselves for the most part, and they pretty much were dominating both the theaters in the West and East. And FDR had to say some curious things that day to address the state of the union. And it's something that you're not really taught about at public schools for a number of reasons, because it really makes you question what they're actually teaching you about the story. You know, when you go to public education or even college these days, you just get a lukewarm placing of material scattered across your brain. That's just some sort of story, some sort of narrative, some sort of telling of how things unfolded. What they don't want to do is go into the primary details because most people find that boring and dull. But hopefully, here I can be a little bit more entertaining and I'll do my best. And there's only one way to do it, and that's live from X. So we'll start at the beginning here and we'll work our way through and maybe skip a little bit. You know, it's kind of a lot to be honest, and doing a whole 2 hour videos of just reading, you might get through it all, but I digress. We start out with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt wheeling on into Congress and getting his little kickstand feet for his hands up to hold his balance until he grabs the podium. And he has this to say to Congress. I address you, the members of the 77th Congress, at a moment unprecedented in history of the Union. I use the word unprecedented because at no previous time has American security been as seriously threatened from without it is today. Since the permanent formation of our government under the Constitution in 1789, most of the periods of crisis in our history have related to our domestic affairs. Fortunately, only one of these, the 4 Year War between the states, ever threatened our national unity. Today, thank God, 130 million Americans in 48 states have forgotten points of the compass in our national unity. So, what he's talking about there and referencing is obviously the Civil War. He's like, the only time where we didn't have any form of unity was during the Civil War. But these days, 130 million Americans in 48 states have forgotten points of the compass in our national unity. He's saying the nation seems rather divided on this very simple and clear event that's happening right now. It is true that that prior to 1914, the United States often had been disturbed by the events in other continents. We had even engaged in two wars with European nations and in a number of undeclared wars in the West Indies. In the Mediterranean and in the Pacific for the maintenance of American rights, for the principles of peaceful commerce. We didn't so much as declare war in the name of peaceful commerce. Very American, very capitalistic. But in no case had a serious threat been raised against our national safety or our continued independence. What I seek to convey in the historic truth that the United States as a nation has at all times maintained clear, definite opposition to any attempt to lock us in behind an ancient Chinese wall while the processions of civilization went past. Today, thinking of our children and of their children, we imposed enforced isolation for ourselves or for any other part of the Americas. The determination of ours extending over all these years was proved, for example, during the quarter century wars following the French Revolution. Okay. So he's talking about conquering, dominating. We've spread our empire wide. We've grown. We've developed. We're on the next level from all these other players in the world. While the Napoleonic struggles did threaten interest of the United States because of the French foothold in the West Indies and in Louisiana, which they bought, and while we engaged in the War of 1812 to vindicate our rights to peaceful trade, it is nevertheless clear that neither France nor Great Britain nor any other nation was aiming at domination of the whole world. Franklin Delano Roosevelt just honestly suggested that no other nation had any clear indication or want or need to conquer the whole world, while Britain at that time still had their empire, which the sun never set on. So it's very hypocritical from that moment right there when he says Britain doesn't want to conquer the world. They've already conquered the world. No, what he's talking about is a new emerging threat that wants to conquer the whole world. In like fashion, from 1815 to 1914, 99 years. No single war in Europe or in Asia continued a real threat against our future or against the future of any of our American nation. And it did say that. It's not me slurring. Or against the future of any other American nation. Except in the Maximilian interlude in Mexico. No foreign power sought to establish itself in this hemisphere, and the strength of the British fleet in the Atlantic has been a friendly strength. It is still a friendly strength. Even when World War broke out in 1914, it seemed to contain only a threat of danger to our own American future. But as time went on, the American people began to visualize what the downfall of democratic nations might mean to our own democracy. If other democratic nations fall and are conquered by these so-called tyrants, so will ours. We need to maintain a global dominance of social democracy. Essentially, is what he said there. We need not overemphasize imperfections in the Peace of Versailles. We need not harp on failure of the democracies to deal with problems of the world reconstruction. We should remember that the peace of 1919 was far less unjust than that kind of pacification, which began even more more even before Munich, and which is being carried on under the new order of tyranny that seeks to spread over every continent today. The American people have unalterably set their faces against that tyranny. We're at war here, folks. And what tyrannical empire is the United States calling to go to war with here? According to FDR. Every realist. It's funny that he calls himself a realist while not being a Christian. Every realist knows that the democratic way of life is at this moment being directly assailed in every part of the world. Assailed either by arms or by secret spreading of poisonous propaganda by those who seek to destroy unity and promote discord in nations that are still at peace. Therefore, as your president, performing any performing my constitutional duty to give to the Congress information of the state of the Union, I find it unhappily necessary to report that the future and the safety of our country and of our democracy are overwhelmingly involved in events far beyond our borders. We must go to war. The people want us to go to war. So who really wanted war? Did Germany really want to go to war with the US? Or was the US just looking for an excuse to get involved? Ah, water break. Armed defense of democratic existence is now being gallantly waged in 4 continents. If that defense falls, all the population of all those resources of Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australasia. Hey? Does it really say that? Is this a place? I guess Australia wasn't really a thing at that point. It was Australasia. Just that weird combination of like Anglos and Islanders and Asians will be dominated by the conquerors. Let us remember that the total of those populations and their resources in those 4 continents greatly exceeds the sum total of the population and the resources of the whole of the Western Hemisphere many times over. We can't allow these people to conquer the third world. We we must conquer the third world. We have to take all those resources and all of those materialistic goods. We can't let the other side get it. The Japanese, the Italians, and the Deutsch. No realistic American can expect from a dictator's peace international generosity, or return of true independence, or world disarmament, or freedom of expression, or freedom of religion, or even good business. The things that matter most, the things that everybody should care about. Safety for all, liberty for all, freedom to express, freedom to worship the devil, and good business. As a nation, as a nation, we take take pride in the fact that we are soft-hearted, but we cannot afford to be soft-headed. We must always be wary of those who, with sounding brass and a tinkling cymbal, preach the ism of appeasement. I'm not actually sure what he's actually referencing there. The ism, socialism, communism, all of the above, any ism besides capitalism. We must especially be aware of that small group of selfish men who would clip the wings of the American eagle in order to feather their own nest. Whoa, whoa, whoa. A small group of selfish men in the back rooms with little hats? What is he referencing here? I have recently pointed out how quickly the tempo of modern warfare could bring into our very midst the physical attack, which we must eventually expect if the dictator nations win this war. There is much loose talk of our immunity from immediate and direct invasion from across the seas. Yeah, I don't see the US particularly getting invaded by another country anytime soon. It sounds very complicated. That's like China trying to invade Europe through the ocean. You know, it's probably not as long. Well, it's definitely not as long for China through the ocean because they had to go through the Atlantic and the Indian, where they just can go to the Pacific for the US. Losing my voice. But it's unlikely, especially at those times. These days, they wouldn't really go for invasion. They'd just try to like carpet bomb everything. At least that's how I would do it. Across the seas. Obviously, as long as the British Navy retains its power, no such danger exists. Even if there were no British Navy, it is not probable that any enemy would be stupid enough to attack us by landing troops in the United States from across thousands of miles ocean until it had acquired strategic bases from which to operate. So he's right there. They need some sort of outpost surrounding the US, which these days none particularly exists. Cuba, I don't know. Cuba's not really a good spot to be in. You're kind of trapped in a cove. Lost my spot of coace. Operate. But we learned much more from the lessons of the past years in Europe, particularly the lesson of Norway, whose essential seaports were captured by treachery and surprise built up over series of years. Not entirely true. The British planned to invade Norway first. I forget the name of the event. I'll plug it in here or wherever. But the British planned to invade it first. And then Germany caught wind of it and they're like, yeah, no, we're gonna take that. We're not letting you have your own little outpost to invade us and destroy us. The first phase of this invasion. Oh wait, I think I read that one. No, I didn't. The first phase of the invasion of this hemisphere would not be the landing of regular troops. The necessary strategic points would be occupied by secret agents and their dupes. And a great number of them are already here. And in Latin America, these immigrants, these German, Italian, and Japanese immigrants, they're the enemy. They're the traitors. They have no loyalty to the US. Hence why the internment of the Japanese happened. But which many of you probably heard, but probably not many of you heard that so were German Americans and Italian Americans, however you want to put it. And they've been building up a list of people of German ancestry since what was it, World War One, with like the early parts of the FBI. Crazy stuff, but FDR is just like, yeah, we know who the enemy is. We've been watching him for the past 20 years. We've been stalking them, writing down their names, checking our list twice, like Santa Claus, making sure we get all the right people. Because obviously, they rounded up all of the Japanese people and put them into internment camps for the most part, all of them. And they couldn't really do that with Germans and Italians because there's so many of them. So they just picked out the bunch that they didn't like and threw them into slave labor concentration camps. As long as the aggressor nations maintain the offensive, they, not we, will choose the time and place and the method of their attack. We should strike first, or they'll do it to us. That is why the future of all the American republics is today in serious danger. That is why this annual message to the Congress is unique in our history. That is why every member of the executive branch of the government and every member of Congress faces great, and of course, it cuts to the other page. But what I find interesting there, if you haven't noticed, he's mentioned republics, like America's in the plural twice now. That's because back then they considered the states to be, you know, unique nations. They're states. The American Republic of republics, because even our own states have their own Congress and leadership and people. And we're at Congress faces great responsibility and great accountability. The need of the moment is that our actions, that our policy should be devoted primarily, almost exclusively, to meeting the foreign peril. And for all our domestic problems are now a part of the great emergency. So hopefully it's recording. I hate it when my screen goes black. I should have touched my phone, but we can just edit that stuff out and I can take a drink of water. Makes it easier. National policy in foreign affairs. The great emergency. That's it. So he's calling World War II and intervening in World War II the great emergency. Kind of like how we had the Great Depression before that. But now we're at the great emergency. Just as our national policy in eternal affairs has been based upon a decent respect for the rights and the dignity of all our fellow men within our gates, so our national policy in foreign affairs has been based on a decent respect for the rights and dignity of all nations, large and small, and the justice of morality must and will win in the end. Our national policy is this. First, by an oppressive expression of the public will and without the regard to partisanship, we are committed to an inclusive national defense. Second, by an impressive expression of the public will and without the regard to partisanship, we are committed to full support of all those resolute peoples everywhere who are resisting aggression and are thereby keeping our war away from our hemisphere. By this support, we express our determination, and the democratic cause shall prevail, and we strengthen the defense and the security of our own nation. We're going to fund everybody else to fight you. We're going to fund the British, and we're going to fund the Soviets to wage war against you. Third, by an impressive expression of the public will, and without regard to the partisanship, we are committed to the proposition that principles of morality and considerations for our own security will never permit us to to acquiescence, to acquiesce, permit us to acquiesce in a peace dictated by aggressors and sponsored by appeasers. We know that enduring peace cannot be bought at the cost of our nation's freedom. We will not settle for peace at our own loss of freedom. This war must wage on. In the recent national election, there was a substantial difference between the two great parties in respect to the national policy. No issue was fought out on this line before the American electorate. Today, it is abundantly evident that the American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action in recognition of obvious danger. Therefore, the immediate need is a swift and driving increase in our amendment production. Leaders of industry and labor have responded to our summons. Goals of speed have been set. In some cases, these goals are being reached ahead of time. In some cases, we are on schedule. In other cases, there are slight but not serious delays. And in some cases, and I am sorry to say very, very important cases, we are all concerned by the slowness of the accomplishment of our plans. The Army and Navy, however, have made substantial progress during the past year. Actual experience is improving and speeding up our methods of production with every passing day, and today's best is not good enough for tomorrow. I am not satisfied with the progress thus far made. The men in charge of the program represent the best in training, in the ability, and in patriotism. They are not satisfied with the progress thus far made. None of us will be satisfied until the job is done. So FDR here is calling out for mass production for military goods and necessities to prop up the military, invest in them, make them grow and establish as established, warring institutions, or at least capable of it, especially by creating arms, weapons, guns, tanks, planes, boats, very large warcraft, air aircraft carriers. No matter whether the original goal was set too high or too low, our objective is quicker and better results. Make it cheap. Make it Sherman cheap. Cheapest tanks on the block. We just need to mass produce whatever we can as quick as possible and make the most money. At the end of the day, the more things you're making and pushing out, the more money you are exchanging within the markets. Makes sense. We are behind schedule in turning out finished airplanes. We are working day and night to solve the innumerable problems and catch up. We are ahead of schedule in building warships, but we are working to get even farther ahead of that schedule. And obviously what happened then was Pearl Harbor, and the Japanese, secretly attacked Pearl Harbor and blew up a bunch of ships and stuff so they could take the oil from the Philippines. It really didn't work in the long run. It only delayed the inevitable. To charge a whole nation from a basis of peacetime production of implements of peace to a basis of wartime production of implements of war is no small task. What a shitty sentence there. I get it's older English, but I read it how it was, okay? To change the whole nation from a basis of peacetime production of implements of peace, you didn't need to have that additional piece of peace to a basis of wartime production of implements of war is no small task. He's being fanciful about his expression of we need to make war shit. We need bombs, big bombs. And the greatest difficulty comes at the beginning of the program. When new tools, new plants, facilities, new assembly lines, new ships, new shipways must first be constructed before the actual material begins to flow steadily and speedily through them. The Congress, of course, must rightly keep itself informed of all times of the progress of the program. However, there is a there is certain information, as the Congress itself will readily recognize, which is the interest of our own security and those of the nations that we are supporting must of needs we kept in confidence. New circumstances are constantly begetting new needs for our safety. I shall ask the Congress for greatly increased new appropriations and authorizations to carry on what we have begun. I also have this I also ask this Congress for authority for the funds sufficient to manufacture additional munitions and war supplies of many kinds to be turned over to those nations which are now in actual war with the aggressor nations. It didn't say the other. I added that with aggressor nations, he said. It needed the as I need water. So here he's saying, okay, so we need to start handing out our military equipment and ammo and weapons and things to the other nations so they can, use them and be able to deal with the current terror enemy. Sorry. Our most useful and immediate role is to act as an arsenal for them, as well as for ourselves. They do not need manpower, but they do need billions of dollars worth of weapons of defense. That's literally a line. Oh, we need to fund the world war. We need to accelerate this war to its conclusion. The time is near when they will not be able to pay for them all in ready cash. You must be debt slaves to us, other nations. You must enslave yourselves to fight this war. We cannot and will not tell them that they must surrender merely because of present inability to pay for that weapons, which we know they must have. I do not recommend that we make them a loan of dollars with which to pay for these weapons, a loan to be repaid in dollars. I recommend that we make it possible for those nations to continue to obtain war materials in the United States, fitting their orders into our own program. Nearly all their material would, if the time ever came, be useful for our own defense. Taking counsel of expert military and naval authorities. Okay, so what he says there is no, we won't charge them the debt for it. We'll take the debt. Give it to us, baby. We got it. Taking counsel of expert military and naval authorities, considering what is best for our own security, we are free to decide how much should be kept here and how much should be sent abroad to our friends, who by their determined and heroic resistance are giving us time in which to make ready our own defense. our heroes. There goes our heroes. Watch them as they go. England, baby, you're saving us. You're taking the blunt of it. Russia, my fellow materialists, my commie in arms, my comrades, continue sending your walls of human bullet shields. For what we send abroad, we shall be repaid within a reasonable time following the close of hostilities. Oh no, we'll still charge them for debt. In similar materials or at our own option in other goods of many kinds, which they can produce and which we need. Hmm. Sell your economy. Sell your economy to us. And that was the deal. That's what happened. We're like, hey, okay, we want this as repayment. You must produce these things. And what was it? It was shipping in a bunch of foreigners, setting up all these different banking chains and other chains of industries, your McDonald's, for example, and setting them across Europe and other places to be economically enslaved with some sort of parasite of some sort of form of existence. Well, standards of existence, I guess. Let us say to the democracies, we Americans are vitally concerned in your defense of freedom. We are putting forth our energies, our resources, and our organizing powers to give you the strength to regain and maintain a free world. We shall send you, in ever increasing numbers, ships, planes, tanks, guns. This is our purpose and our pledge. In fulfillment of this purpose, we will not be intimidated by the threats of dictators that they will regard as a breach of international law or as an act of war or aid to the democracies which dare to resist their aggression. Oh, that was a long tongue twister there. Such aid is not an act of war. We act of war, even if a dictator should laterally tongue twister, unilaterally. I said that right, I'd say. Close enough. Unilaterally proclaims it so to be. When the dictators, if the dictators are ready to make our war upon us, they will not ready to make war upon us. They will not wait for an act of war on our part. They did not wait for Norway or Belgium or nor the Netherlands to commit an act of war. They invaded them, except for Switzerland. When the dictators, if oh well, I read that one. Last thing, their only interest is in a new one-way international law, which lacks mutual mutuality mutuality in its observance and therefore becomes an instrument of oppression. Whew. 4 pages down. We haven't even gotten to the good stuff yet. Only two more left. And I condensed them a little bit, to be honest. I'd rather not be reading 8. So I've read over 4, how it was originally, even though the last one was kind of short. Oh, because if you've never heard of this speech, this is actually known as Franklin Delano Roosevelt's Four Freedoms. And we're actually going to be getting into that segment here shortly on what those freedoms are. Guess not that short, but short enough. The happiness of future generations of Americans may well depend upon how effective and how immediate we can make our aid felt. No one can tell the exact character of the emergency situations that we may be called upon to meet. The nation's hands must not be tied when the nation's life is in danger. We must all prepare to make the sacrifices of that duh the emergency, almost as serious as war itself. The emergency, the great emergency. It's not even war itself, but we're in an emergency. The destruction of democracies. Almost as serious as war itself demands. Whatever stands in the way of speed and efficiency in defense preparations must give way to the national need. A free nation has the right to expect full cooperation from all groups. A free nation has the right to look to the leaders of business, of labor, and of agriculture to take the lead in stimulating effort, not among other groups, but within their own group. The best way of dealing with the few slackers or troublemakers in our midst is first to to shame them by patriotic example, and if that fails, to use the sovereignty of government to save government. Lock those suckers up, throw them into their slave labor camps. As men do not live by bread alone, they do not fight by armaments alone. Those who man or defense, those who man our defenses, and those behind them who build our defenses, must have the stamina and the courage which come from the unshakable belief in the manner of life which they are defending. The mighty action that we are calling for cannot be based upon a disregard of our things worth fighting for. The nation takes great satisfaction and much strength from the things which have been done to make its people conscious. To make its people conscious of their individual stake in the preservation of democratic life in America. Those things have toughened the fiber of our people, have renewed their faith, and strengthened their devotion to the institutions we make ready to protect. Certainly, this is no time for any of us to stop thinking about the social and economic problems which are the root cause of the social revolution, which is today a supreme factor of the world. For there is nothing mysterious about the foundations of a healthy and strong democracy, the basic things expected by our people of their political and economic systems are simple. Okay? These are the core things that make up our economic and political system and lifestyle in the US. These are the things FDR is calling to defend, that we must maintain and spread throughout the world. Equality of opportunity for youth and for others. Jobs for those who can work. Security for those who need it. The ending of special privilege for the few. The preservation of civil liberties for everybody. Glorious, wonderful, outright inspiring. The ability to work. And also, I guess, the enjoyment of the fruits of scientific progress in a wider and constantly rising standard of living. We must reach the highest level of standard of living for everybody who wants to work. and those who don't. These are the simple, basic things that most must never be lost in sights in the turmoil and unbelievable complexity of our modern world. The inner abiding strength of our economic and political systems is dependent upon the degree to which they fulfill these expectations. Many subjects connected with our social economy call for immediate improvement. As examples, there's some ways that we can improve the most greatest and wonderful political and economic system the world has ever come across. I wonder what those improvements might be. We should bring more citizens under the coverage of old age pensions and unemployment insurance. We need more fucking people. We need to let in everybody. Send them all in, bring them all here so we can maximize our wealth of people on pensions and unemployment insurance. We should widen the opportunities for adequate medical care. We should plan a better system by which persons deserving or needing gainful employment may obtain it. Get these people to work. I have called for personal sacrifice. I am assured of the willingness of almost all Americans to respond to that call. It's funny how synchronous all these things that he's calling for are things that people value so much today. I mean, we just had Elon Musk complaining about how we need to let in Indians because the American people are stupid on H-1B. And here we have Franklin Delano Roosevelt calling for this, you know, 80 years ago, more than 80 years ago, I guess 84, to we should plan a better system by which persons deserving or needing gainful employment may obtain it. We complain about the border and all these poor people coming here and living off welfare and social fare and corporate fare to pay for their lifestyles and existence by just coming here. And here we had him before complaining about we need more people on pensions and unemployment insurance. Pay for the world. And lastly, and most importantly, something they always scream about, they've been screaming about since the beginning of time itself: medical care. Everyone needs universal medical insurance, Obamacare for all. I have called for a personal sacrifice. I am assured of the willingness of almost all Americans to respond to that call. A part of the sacrifice means the payment of more money in taxes. Oh, things never change and things always seem to stay the same. In my budget message, I shall recommend that a greater portion of this great defense program be paid for from taxation than we are paying today. Future taxation. Future taxes will pay for paying for this war. No person should try or be allowed to get rich out of this program, and the principle of tax payments in accordance with ability to pay should be constantly before our eyes to guide our legislation. If the Congress maintains these principles, the voters putting patriotism ahead of pocketbooks will give you their applause. In the future days, which we seek to make secure, we look forward to a world founded upon our four essential human freedoms: Hence why this speech, like I said, is called The Four Freedoms of Liberalism. The first freedom is the freedom of speech and expression everywhere in the world. The second is the freedom of every person to worship God in his own way everywhere in the world. The third freedom from want. The third is the freedom from want, which translated into world terms means economics, understandings which will secure to every nation a healthy peacetime life for its inhabitants everywhere in the world. The fourth freedom is from fear. The fourth is freedom from fear, which translated into world terms means a worldwide reduction of armaments a, to such a point and in such a thorough fashion that no nation will be in the position to commit an act of physical aggression against any neighbor anywhere in the world. That is no vision of a distant. Okay, well, the first thing here, rather than reading on, I got a comment. Like, it's saying everywhere in the world. We need these freedoms, the freedom of speech, the freedom to worship God in your own unique way, the freedom from want, and the freedom from fear for everybody in the world. Nobody else can have a military. Nobody else can have their own unique economy. We must deliver them from their want. We must deliver them from their fear. And it's all for the purpose to worship God in your own way. Sounds rather satanic. Sounds rather godless, heathenistic, very unchristian for the most part, though. That is no vision of a distant millennium. It is a definite basis for the kind of world attainable in our own time and generation. That kind of world is in every antithesis the so called new order of tyranny. Okay? That kind of world is the very antithesis of the so-called new order of tyranny, which the dictators seek to create with the crash of a bomb. How ironic. The dictators are the ones who want to drop that big fucking bomb and kill hundreds of thousands, well, I guess tens of thousands of people, and aftermath hundreds of thousands. Yeah. It wasn't the US that dropped the nuke. It wasn't the US who bombed Nagasaki and Hiroshima. You know, two of the most Catholic outposts within Japan, ironic enough. To that new order, we oppose the greater conception, the moral order. A good society is able to face schemes of world domination and foreign revolutions alike without fear. We have to fight the foreign revolutions who are trying to dominate the world. Since the beginning of our American history, we have been engaged in change, in perpetual peacetime revolution, a revolution which goes on steadily, quietly, adjusting itself to changing conditions. Without the concentration camp or the quick lime in the ditch, the world order in which we seek is the cooperation of free countries working together, friendly, civilized society. ironic saying they did set up concentration camps, enslaved people, and took away their freedoms within their own country, and also imported in slaves. We're talking during World War II. I'm not talking pre, Civil War. This nation has placed its destiny in the hands and heads and hearts of its millions of free men and women, and its faith and freedom under the guidance of God. Freedom means the supremacy of the human rights everywhere. Our support goes to those who struggle to gain those rights or keep them. Our strength is our unity of purpose to that high concept that can be. To that high concept, there can be no end, save victory. That's how the speech concludes. There's some important aspects of that speech because after the war, obviously before it ended, Roosevelt died, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So he didn't finish it off, but his wife was still a lot around at that point, and she helped create that image and that dream, which was inspired from that speech from FDR, and that is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It was set up in 1948, so like 4 years after his death, at the Palais des Chalots in Paris, France. One of the chairmen at that time was Eleanor Roosevelt, committee chaired by Eleanor Roosevelt. 44 votes in favor for it. Has a bunch of articles and annoying bullshit talking about its creation. It was inspired, obviously it was inspired by Franklin's speech. I mentioned that. Mentioned some things in the preamble about that. And then you get into Article 1, it talks about all the stupid bullshit. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. Everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in the Declaration. Everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security. No one shall be held in slavery or servitude. No one shall be subjected to torture or cruelty and all the icky stuff like that. Everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person for the law. Interesting. Getting to some of the worst ones here. All are equal before the law and are titled without any discrimination. Everyone has the right to an effective remedy by the competent national tribunals. Okay. No one shall be subjected to arbitrary arrest. And everyone is entitled to full equality to a fair and public hearing. And they start adding two, and it goes down to 30. 30 just saying nothing, blah, 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 a bunch of bullshit. So that's where we got human rights from, was FDR wanted to spread out liberty and justice and the four freedoms for all. Glorious stuff. So on January 6th of 1941, the President of the United States called for the U.S. to go for war, prepare all necessities for war, and fund and sponsor war by all means possible to wage against the tyrannies of fascism and Nazism across the world. And that same speech, he called certain swaths of the population residing within the U.S. to be traitors, cowards, and people who oppose the very lifestyle and existence that they currently value and hold within the U.S. And it's funny and ironic how in 2020 we had a similar thing of unfolding events happen where the government's calling people a bunch of traitors who are betraying democracy and the lifestyle of the country. and that they have to wage this war against this evil, tyrannical powers that be in the great emergency. Some things change, some things just tend to stay the same. But hopefully, things will get even worse. So I've been the King's Fool, and I hope you all have a good one.